Yep. I mean, a long time ago, well, not that long ago, I remember back in 2003, we had a lot of, was the term like Little Lord Fauntleroy? Is that how they say it? Maybe I'm wrong, but we had a lot of little kings and queens running around the countryside around 2006 or so. Around 2003, I used to go yard sailing on Saturdays. I used to have weekends off, and I'd go around and I'd see how, I'd see, a larger, nice house. Guy would have a boat. He'd have a chopper. You have, restored car, a car for the wife, a car for himself, maybe a boat, maybe another boat. And I would basically say, man, I'd like to get a job wherever he's at and do what he's doing. And how do these people afford this stuff? How do they do this stuff? And I'd just see some of these homes, and people, they'd have, brand new Harley Davidsons and brand new, whatever. They'd have all kinds of, motorcycles and cars and whatnot. And I'm like, what do they do for a living? And 2008 rolled around, and everybody, I guess they could say, tied one out. and we kind of saw what everybody was. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. And man, I just remember it's like a constant barrage of I go up the mountains, and just all the bistros were full, and the wine bars were full, and it's still full. A lot of networkers and movers and shakers, like that sort of thing. And but man, I mean, even just my little outings up every weekend would take a little bit out of my pocket. The money would. And I'm like, man, what does everybody do for a living? Then 2008 rolled around, we found out what everybody does for a living. And a lot of those people didn't have jobs. A lot of those people lost their homes. A lot of those people went nuts and began to tear copper out of the walls. There was one case where an actual police officer was ripping the facade off of his home and doing things like that. Wrecking the house. And it got so bad where real estate companies would, or not real estate companies, I don't know, whoever's in charge of this stuff, would say, hey, listen, stay in the home, and they would offer to pay the family $3,000 to $6,000, to get out and get on their feet and get a rental or something, And so that was kind of cool. But I remember early on when the foreclosures hit, I remember driving down the street and seeing a vacant anchor store, several vacant anchor stores. And I remember seeing freshly ejected families, because I know when a homeless person is a full out lifer stew bum that's just on the streets. They've just been there a while. And I know when a family is, out of a place to live. I know when they're relatively, as I can say, middle class. And I remember seeing these families living under the awnings of these businesses, just kind of freshly ejected from the homes, and they'd have the kids out there with them. They'd have, a blanket laid out, and pretty wild stuff. And and some people say that when children go through a depression, an economic, cycle like that, a lot of times they don't remember it. But I'll tell you what, I think if I was a kid above a certain age and I was having to camp, under an awning of a business, Maybe I had some kids at school making fun of me. You know, word got out and they're making fun of me. Or better yet, maybe I'm not in school. I'd probably be pretty, influenced by that. And I'd probably begin to see society through a different lens. And I think a lot of times, people have a tendency to kind of judge things through their own myopathy. I always ask myself, is this my myopathy? Is this my lens? Is this my narrow view of the world? And is this my bias? And the one thing I'll give myself, I am one of the few people that I know that could say, well, this, and this, but I have a bias, and here's the bias. I can actually sit there and say, well, I do have a bias, and take a bias into account. That's one thing I don't see a lot of people doing. When was the last time you had somebody discuss a matter, and say, yeah, but I have a bias towards this? Maybe like in a certain, clinical environment, maybe somebody might admit they have a bias, just to kind of put that out there. So I don't know. I'm one of the few people that can admit that I have a bias. Yeah, well, I am kind of biased towards this, or I am kind of favoritism toward this. But anyway, that's just off on a way far tangent. Anyway, I'm just going to say, myopic lens, the way I view the world, that has to affect somebody the way they view the world later on. To say, hey, we were like living under the awning of a vacant business. And it was pretty damn ugly. And eventually, I guess what happened was a lot of those families, when they would get the notice, they would say, hey, listen, it's going to be about a year before we got to move anybody even close to getting in this house. And they would basically tell the families, whoever is responsible for some of this stuff, that, mow the lawn, stay in the house, go ahead and keep an eye on the house, and then as soon as you get the phone call, move out of the house, and they'll give them the $3,000 to $6,000 payout, and they would go find the other house, because they found out that the homes were actually better if they had people living in the houses than if they had been emptied. Because when they're emptied, squatters come in, criminal elements begin to use them for safe houses. But earlier on, before all this stuff happened, just way, way, way earlier, early on when these foreclosures occurred, people had pets in the house. And I don't know if this is just sadness, or if this is shame, or whatever. But I mean, to me, I don't think it's so much shame. I think it's kind of this. I think it's along the same behavior that drove a lot of people to destroy the homes they were being, kicked out of. But when they left, they would lock their doors, and they would leave their pets in the house. Okay, they would just like, well, we're going to a new apartment, or we're going here, or I can't take the dog. And they leave the dog in the house. And maybe nobody would be there for like 3 months. The house would be locked up in 90 days. And they were finding these animals in houses. And there was a certain crew of people that actually would go to these houses and clear everyone's crap out of the house. No, I can never imagine my baby being locked in a house. But people would go, clear stuff out of these houses. And I'm just like going, man, what a job. What a job that would be, to have to basically be the person that goes and sifts through what I would call the rubble of this disaster. Just go through it and clear this crap out. And what eventually led to the whole, $3,000 to $6,000 thing was, people getting paid to move out quietly, was the damage being done to these houses was so great. Like, in a matter of like not a day, a family could do $75,000 worth of damage to these homes that were being, taken back by whoever lent them the money. But to me, I kind of think that people leaving their dogs in homes, this is just my opinion, but is more akin to the behavior that's responsible for destroying the home rather than the shame part of it. You know, I just don't think that people were really responsible. And you know, and I used to kind of laugh at, you know, I'd get laughed at a little bit, you know, to be the guy that, you know, I never understood how credit worked. I never understood how any of that stuff worked. I paid all my credit cards and all my debts off. And I thought that I would have a, you know, a good credit rating. And I knew someone that was in the industry, and they said, well, you know, you might want to go ahead and look at getting yourself a house, because all those people that were, you know, had the trouble during the housing crisis, they might be getting let back into the game. Like their score will kind of reset, and they'll be able to build their credit back up again and get back in the game. And I kind of think that's kind of interesting how someone like me, you know, who tries to save and invest and do certain things to grow my money, stay out of debt. I mean, in society gets a lot less than the person who basically runs out, accesses a bunch of other people's money, and buys a bunch of stuff they can't afford. And then when they lose it, throw a massive tantrum, you know, wreck the house, lock their dog in the house. And then, you know, 4 or 5 years down the road, they get to set up shop and do it again. I mean, what's up with that? All right, well, guys, you know the drill. Don't worry about the haters. Just let the haters worry about you. And you know what? I'll do my thing, and everybody can just do theirs, and that's that. See you on the next one, folks. Which button do I turn off? Okay, it's night.